the Earth eons ago. During the Mesozoic era, when the world was ruled by reptiles, the skies where birds fly today swarmed with pterosaurs. The seas that are filled today with fish and aquatic mammals teemed with ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs. And the land that is inhabited by many animals was the domain of the dinosaurs.
Like all animals today, they took many shapes and sizes, and had many adaptations to survive. But then, 65 million years ago, they vanished. No one knows for a fact what happened to them. Perhaps they couldn't adapt to the changing Earth, or they ran out of their food.
However, the most common theory is that a meteorite the size of Mount Everest struck the Earth and slowly caused the extinction of these majestic beasts. Not all traces of their existence were lost, however.
In the late 19th century, mankind started discovering their fossils, skeletons, footprints, and even their poop turned to stone. Standing between us and these fossils is our imagination. It allows us to see these bones as living flesh and blood animals. Over the years, dinosaurs have been immortalized through toys, foods, those animatronics at the zoo, memes even, and especially cinema.
For the latter, there have been many movies that have brought these not-so-terrible lizards to life with various special effects and even animation. And yet, no other motion picture in this category has been considered quite as iconic or even as revolutionary as Jurassic Park. A film that has been celebrated by people from all around the world as a shining example of science fiction and as one of the most groundbreaking features in cinema history. As of this video, the film has spawned 5 sequels that have all seen success in one way or another. But how is it that this came to be known as one of, if not the greatest dinosaur movie of all time? Let's look into its history, or prehistory, and find out.
For this series, we'll be talking about each of the movies that have been made. And with each of these videos, we'll be talking about how they were made and how they did during and after the time of their releases.
And now, audiences, our dear viewers, welcome to the prehistory of Jurassic Park. Let's start at the very beginning with John Michael Crichton, a young physician, producer, director, screenwriter, and best-selling author born on October 23, 1942. Since he was 14 years old, Michael had always wanted to be a writer, and in 1965, he published his first novel, Odds On, under the pen name John Lang. You see, Crichton had multiple pen names like John Lang, Jeffrey Hudson, and even Michael Douglas. Michael would go on to write and publish many novels, a lot of which received film adaptations, including Binary, The Great Train Robbery, and Congo. However, his best-known book, the one that would leave the biggest impact, had yet to come.
One day in 1989, Crichton was having a discussion with a friend from the film industry, Steven Spielberg, about a screenplay that would become the TV series ER. Steven asked Michael what he was doing literature-wise, and he told Steven he was writing a novel about dinosaurs and DNA. Needless to say, Crichton had Spielberg at dinosaurs. Steven immediately lost interest in ER as a movie, and started asking his friend about his dinosaur book. He kept asking more and more questions, until he had coaxed the whole story out of Michael.
Originally in 1983, Crichton conceived a screenplay about a graduate student who perfectly recreates a pterodactyl.
But eventually, given his reasoning that genetic research would be expensive, especially for someone who just got out of college,
and as he said,
there is no pressing need to create a dinosaur, Michael then concluded it would emerge from a desire to entertain. This introduced the idea of a wildlife park of extinct animals. Originally, the story was told from the point of view of a child, but this had an extremely negative response from the people who read the draft. They felt it would be better if it was told by an adult, so Michael rewrote it to be told by an adult, which received more positive feedback. The book was published on November 20th, 1990 under the title Jurassic Park, and it went on to become not just a bestseller, but also Michael Crichton's signature novel.
And just like many of Michael's other books, the novel was about to receive a film adaptation. And just like its source material, that movie would be named
Jurassic Park.
It's about a billionaire industrialist named John Hammond, who invites 4 individuals, paleontologist Dr. Alan Grant, and his paleobotanist girlfriend Dr. Ellie Sattler, chaotician and mathematician Ian Malcolm, and even John's own lawyer, Donald Gennaro, to visit and endorse his theme park on Isla Nublar, an island 120 miles west of Costa Rica. When they get there, they find that the island is populated by dinosaurs. And I mean legit living, breathing dinosaurs, brought back to life by Hammond's company, InGen, short for International Genetics Incorporated, who clone them by digging up prehistoric mosquitoes trapped in amber, extracting the blood from inside and filling the holes in the DNA with frog DNA, thus creating baby dinosaurs. During a preview tour of the park, however, the power breaks down, and now the dinosaurs are loose on the island. This breakdown was caused by Dennis Nedry, a computer programmer who felt that InGen wasn't paying him enough. So when a man named Lewis Dodson,
we've got Dodson here!
offered him $1.5 million to steal some dinosaur embryos, Nedry gladly accepted the job. But as he tries to get to the East Dock with the embryos, he ends up being killed and eaten by a venomous Dilophosaurus. Now John, Ellie, Ian, and the park's game warden, Robert Muldoon, must find a way to fix the power, while Alan has to escort John's grandkids, Tim and Lex Murphy, across the island. Together, they must fight for survival against such dinosaurs as a stampede of Gallimimus, dangerous and dangerously smart velociraptors, and debuting in her iconic role,
The Before the book was published, everyone wanted the film rights, including Columbia Pictures and Richard Donner, 20th Century Fox and Joe Dante, even Warner Brothers and Tim Burton. Yes, Tim Burton wanted to direct Jurassic Park. I mean, ultimately, Universal acquired the rights for Spielberg in the spring of 1990, but think about it. What would Jurassic Park look like directed by Tim Burton? Would it star Johnny Depp as Ian Malcolm? Would it have a darker look like in Burton's Batman movies or The Nightmare Before Christmas? What would the score sound like, composed by Danny Elfman? It would have been very Burton-esque indeed.
Anyway, as Jurassic Park was originally conceived as a screenplay, it would seem fitting for Michael Crichton to adapt his novel into a screenplay for the feature, especially when Universal paid him $500,000. And so, by the time Steven was done with Hook in 1991, Michael had finished the script, but he only adapted 10 to 20% of the book. Michael's novel was, as he described it, fairly long, so it was necessary to remove some scenes for practical and budgetary reasons. Crichton also toned down the violence since it got pretty graphic in the book.
After that, one of the writers of Hook, Malia Scotch Marmo, spent 5 months writing a second draft where she combined Dr. Grant with Ian Malcolm. After reading Marmo's script twice, Spielberg dismissed it and the film went through another rewrite by David Koepp, who fashioned an entirely new script where he removed a scene in the novel where Grant, Tim, and Lex are on a raft, which David said would have been monstrously expensive, and streamlined much of the book's exposition by including a tram tour and Steven's idea of a cartoon that would show how InGen created the dinosaurs.
Another deviation from the source material was with the characters. On top of keeping some of them alive, Koepp altered their personalities, where John Hammond went from a greedy psychopath to a nicer, more naive old man, since Spielberg identified with the character for his obsession with showmanship. and Dr. Grant went from having no problem with kids in the novel to being a little more hostile towards them, but then growing more tolerant of Tim and Lex as he protects them throughout the movie. David even switched the kids' ages, where Tim was made younger than in the book and Lex was older.
The film also left out many of the different dinosaurs from the book, leaving only 7 species: Brachiosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Triceratops, Tyrannosaurus rex, Dilophosaurus, Gallimimus, and Velociraptor.
Speaking of which, another interesting aspect of the development was the special effects used to create the dinosaurs. Even on storyboards, it was clear that bringing Steven's ambitious plans for the dinosaurs to life would require an uncanny level of movie magic. One of the first ideas was to animate the dinos in stop motion, similar to the films of pioneer Willis O'Brien, like 1925's The Lost World and 1933's King Kong. In fact, the King Kong encounter at Universal Studios Hollywood inspired Steven's initial plan for the dinosaurs, which was to make them full-sized animatronics. Steven initially wanted to hire Bob Gurr to go as far as making all the dinosaurs full-sized, but that was just his wishful thinking.
On top of that, doing all this practically would be expensive, even for a movie $63 million in the making.
So instead, Steven sought out some of the best effects supervisors in Hollywood, the ones who would be the real miracle workers of Jurassic Park. He brought in Michael Lanteri to supervise the on-set effects, Dennis Muren, a member of Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM, to do the digital compositing, Stan Winston to create the animatronics for the close-ups, or when the actors would interact with the dinos. And for the wide shots, Steven brought in Phil Tippett to animate them in Go Motion. Coincidentally, Phil had previously conceived, directed, and supervised the 1984 experimental animated short, Prehistoric Beast. So Tippett had experience with Go Motion dinosaurs. He did some movement tests on a T-Rex and a raptor, and even made Go Motion animatics of the T-Rex paddock scene and the raptors in the kitchen scene. But while Steven's kids bought it, Steven himself knew it still felt a little Go Motion-y.
Now I know what you're thinking. What's the difference between Go Motion and stop motion?
I know I was.
Here's what I found. Go Motion has more of a motion blur than normal stop motion, where you see everything so clearly. This blur is achieved by either smearing Vaseline on a glass plate in front of the camera every shot, bumping the puppet before taking a shot, or moving the table. This technique was co-developed by Phil Tippett and ILM, who had used it in Star Wars, both The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
Meanwhile, Dennis Muren came in to see Steven and show him a test. When he saw Dennis's test, Steven was so blown away by the technology that he knew it would change movies forever. That technology was computer-generated imagery. Steven had never, outside of National Geographic documentaries, seen movements this smooth, and it was clear that Phil Tippett's Go Motion could be replaced by this breakthrough CGI. But Steven didn't have the heart to call Phil and tell him.
I understand, Steven. You don't just go up to your friend and say,
"Hey, Phil, we'd like to, replace what you were going to do on the film. Creating 100 shots with the best Go Motion ever done in history with CGI."
Eventually, Phil saw the test, and knowing that the plug was pulled on the Go Motion they were going to use for Jurassic Park, said to Steven, "I think I'm extinct." Steven actually liked the sound of that, and wrote it into the script as dialogue.
So what are you thinking?
We're out of a job. Don't you mean extinct?
Though he did it as a joke to rub it into Phil, Steven felt bad for him and didn't want his knowledge on dinosaur movements or his team's skills to go to waste. I mean, those were some great animators he had with him. ILM's solution was a software that bridged the gap between stop motion and CGI, a software they nicknamed the Dinosaur Input Device. It worked like a stop motion puppet, which you could move frame by frame, and the movements would be transferred into a model on the computer. So Phil didn't go extinct, he evolved. He was even credited as the movie's dinosaur supervisor. While it may not have been the first time that computer graphics were used to bring dinosaurs to life, since there were a few shorts that preceded it, like 1985's Chromosaurus, 1990's Stegosaurus the Roof Lizard, and 1992's Dino Tours, Jurassic Park was the first to present photorealistic CGI dinos.
For the cast, the actors who nearly got the roles included Harrison Ford as Dr. Grant, Sean Connery as John Hammond, Christina Ricci, who played Wednesday in 1991's The Addams Family as Lex Murphy, Sandra Bullock, Gwyneth Paltrow, Robin Wright, Julianne Moore, Helen Hunt, Terry Hatcher, Elizabeth Hurley, and Sherilyn Fenn were all considered for Ellie Sattler, and even Jim Carrey auditioned for Ian Malcolm.
As terrific as Jim's audition was, however, casting director Janet Hershenson always had one man in mind after she read the book. Ultimately, that man was Jeff Goldblum.
Life, finds a way.
Also, Laura Dern was Steven's first choice for Sattler. Dr. Alan Grant was based on real-life paleontologist Jack Horner, who even helped the film crew make their dinosaurs based on real-life facts and discoveries. What Jack wanted was to portray the dinosaurs not as reptiles like lizards, but as what he believed were the descendants of dinosaurs, birds. Even Spielberg wanted them shown not as monsters as they had been portrayed in many movies before, but as actual animals, doing as animals do. Understanding this, Jack Horner supervised the creature designs, and Mark Crash McCreary created the final look of the dinosaurs.
Also, as the dinos were to be portrayed more as animals than monsters, living animals were used to help the filmmakers create their extinct animals, not just as reference for their movements, but also sources for their sounds. Assistant sound director Chris Boyes went out and recorded many animal sounds, which supervising sound editors Gary Ridgstrom and Richard Hims put together to make the dinosaur sounds heard in the movie.
The team originally considered filming in Costa Rica, but that was scrapped when they realized that the Costa Rican government wouldn't allow them to build roads to get to their filming locations. So instead, they decided to film on Kauai, Hawaii, where my family and I actually spent our spring break in 2014. Seriously, not only did I turn 18 years old there, not only did I enter adulthood on the Hawaiian island of Kauai, but I also saw some of the filming locations for Jurassic Park. We were on an ATV tour, and our tour guide showed us where they shot some of the scenes.
The movements of the Brachiosaurus were based on giraffes and elephants, and the animals used to create their sounds included elephants, cows, geese, swans, and even donkeys. The Brachiosaurus was the first CGI dinosaur created during post-production.
The visitor center went through different designs, from having Brachiosaurus-shaped columns to looking more square. Even the rotunda inside looked different. The exterior was a facade built in Kauai, while the different rooms inside were built in sound stages.
The animation for Mr. DNA, the cartoon character who explains the process of making the dinosaurs, was done by Kurtz & Friends, an animation studio in Burbank, California, founded by Bob Kurtz in 1972, that mostly did commercials for Chevron and Taco Bell, and titles for movies like Honey, I Blew Up the Kid and George of the Jungle, starring Brendan Fraser.
The hatchling in the laboratory scene was originally a baby Triceratops before it was changed to a baby Velociraptor.
We bred raptors.
For the sounds of the raptor hatching, Foley artist Denny Thorpe used ice cream cones, cantaloupe, and a pineapple with goo on it.
As for the iconic tour vehicles, they were originally Toyota cars in the novel, but that was changed after Steven Spielberg made a deal with the Ford Motor Company, who provided 7 Ford Explorers. ILM, along with veteran automobile designer George Barris, created the illusion of self-driving cars by simply hiding the driver in the trunk, which may have also created the illusion that a ghost was driving.
The first dinosaur on the filmmaker's schedule was the animatronic sick Triceratops. This was the one dinosaur filmed on location in Kauai. 8 of the 9 puppeteers for the trike were underground, controlling different parts of the body through cables, while the 9th was on the surface, controlling the eyes with a remote control. The animatronic was actually painted with black and faint green spots, but Stan Winston told them to cover it in dirt to look more realistic, since some animals cover themselves in the dirt of their environments, including elephants. Though if you watch the movie and look close enough, you can still sort of see the beautiful colors of the trike through the dirt. And that one big pile of shit was simply one big pile of clay, mud, and straw. And it didn't even smell. It was just drizzled in honey and papayas to attract flies.
While they filmed on Kauai, the team was caught in a very dangerous natural disaster that hit the island on September 11, 1992. Hurricane Iniki. A hurricane that destroyed nearly 1,500 houses, damaged an additional 5,000, killed 6 people, and blew open several chicken coops. So now there are feral chickens roaming the island. Like the dinosaurs in the film, this was a force of nature that simply could not be controlled, and it ultimately delayed the filming on location for the picture, but only by 1 day of shooting. In the meantime, the team managed to film footage to use in the movie for when the storm hits Isla Nublar. When life gave them lemons, they made lemonade.
The Tyrannosaur paddock was filmed on location during the day, but at night, it was filmed on a replica in Stage 16 at Warner Brothers Studio. For the ripples in the glass of water, Spielberg got the idea while listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire in his car. He noticed the rear view mirror was shaking because of the noise.
So Steven decided to incorporate that into the movie.
What's more interesting about the effect is how it was done. The filmmakers had a hard time getting the ripples to look just right until Michael Lantieri experimented with his guitar. He put a glass of water on it and played it until he got to the right frequency. To replicate this for the scene, they fed a guitar string through the car, down to the ground, and then a guy would pluck the string. Voila! Steven decided at the last minute to add rain to the scene. The only problem? The animatronic T-Rex's skin wasn't waterproof. When they filmed with rain, the Rex would get so wet it developed the shakes.
So the crew had to dry her off constantly between takes.
There were actually 2 animatronics made for the T-Rex. The first one was 37 feet long and full-sized, while the second was more detailed, built from the waist up, and used for close-up shots and more intense interactions. Like when the dinosaur attacks Tim and Lex, and when she destroys the bathroom hut where Donald Gennaro is hiding before he becomes a Tyrannosaurus tidbit. For the moment where the T-Rex eats the lawyer, he was replaced with a digital double for when the dinosaur shook him in her mouth.
The Dilophosaurus was purposefully scaled down, since its real-life counterpart grew to 3 meters or 10 feet in height. This way, the dinosaur wouldn't be confused with the Velociraptor, which in the movie was also 3 meters or 10 feet high, when in real life it was only 6 feet long and 3 feet high, making it the size of a domesticated turkey.
That doesn't look very scary. More like a 6-foot turkey.
Back onto the Dilophosaurus. As most of the mechanics at Stan Winston Studios were more interested in creating the animatronics for the T-Rex and the Triceratops, the only one who was interested in the spitter was Rick Gallinson, who had only been in the industry for about a year. Rick thought that he would be an assistant mechanic to one of the longtime guys like Rick Landon, but because he was the only one who raised his hand, Gallinson ended up with the responsibility of leading the team for the Dilophosaurus. The spitter's hopping was based on ostriches, and on set, a trench was built for the animatronic's path, but Steven elected to just have it stand in its position to make the scene more ominous and surprising. The animatronic itself had 3 interchangeable heads. Head number 1 had the dinosaur's neck frill in a lowered position. Head 2 was mechanized to allow the frill to move. And head number 3 had the frill opened and even included 2 holes under the tongue to spit its venom. The spitting was done with a paintball mechanism, and the venom was a mixture of methacryl, food coloring, and KY jelly. Ugh, knowing that makes the venom even grosser. The sounds of the Dilophosaurus consisted of swan calls, a hawk, and a rattlesnake combined, plus a howler monkey. While Wayne Knight, the actor who played Dennis Nedry, had a miserable time shooting the scene, falling down a hill, getting soaking wet, and having no food on him, plus the fact that he was 327 pounds and could barely walk, Wayne actually loved watching it.
The T-Rex chase was inspired by the 1962 film Hatari and filmed on the jungle backlot at Warner Brothers. Originally, the Rex was supposed to be heard but not seen, not the other way around.
Until Steven changed the scene so it would be seen and heard.
Most of the brachiosaurs in the film were CGI. The one that wakes Grant and the kids up was the only animatronic brachiosaurus, until she sneezes on Lex, in which case, she's CGI just like the rest.
For the Gallimimus Stampede, the dinosaurs were all based on the same run cycle, except the animators made a few changes to each of the galleys by adjusting their movements and their sizes. In fact, the digital artists filmed themselves acting like dinosaurs to get the right idea on how they would behave. Because of Aniki, the crew couldn't film the stampede on Kauai. The solution? Shoot the sequence at Koaloa Ranch on the island next door, Oahu. When the T-Rex shakes and kills a Gallimimus, the The sound is actually Gary Rydstrom's dog playing with a rope toy.
There was originally supposed to be a scene filmed where John Raymond Arnold, played by the one and only Samuel L. Jackson, would go to the shed to turn on the power before being killed by a velociraptor. But the sets for the film, including that scene, were destroyed by Aniki. However, even if this scene wasn't filmed, the movie cleverly reveals that Ray Arnold was killed by having Ellie Sattler find his severed arm in the power station while escaping the jaws of a velociraptor.
Clever film. A lot went into making the raptors in the kitchen scene. The animatics by Phil Tippett showed the raptors with reptilian tongues, and remember when I said Jack Horner wanted the dinosaurs represented as birds? Well, because of this, Jack did not like the reptilian tongues. You see, birds don't have those kinds of tongues, and if dinosaurs were related to birds, they wouldn't have had them either. So if they kept that in the movie, it would have ruined all their efforts to make the dinosaurs bird-like. So yeah, the tongues were kind of omitted from the scene. I say kind of because if you watch the scene and look closely, you can still see the raptor licking the ladle, but the tongue isn't as long as in the animatic, so I guess Jack was okay with it. And that's just what happened in pre-production.
When they filmed the scene, there were various practical effects, including animatronic body parts for different shots, and full-body raptor suits for some shots when the dinosaurs walked around the kitchen. For the rest of the shots, CGI was used to bring the raptors to life.
When Lex hangs from the edge of the vent, this shot was done with a stunt woman. When she looked up at the camera, her face was replaced with that of Ariana Richards, the child actress who played Lex.
One of the biggest changes from the original storyboards was the ending where they escaped the island. In version A, Grant, Tim, and Lex would be in a Jeep before a tree blocked their route and forced them to go on foot. Then the T-Rex would chase them, but they would make it to the helicopter and narrowly escape the Rex. In version B, they were in the visitor center and they would kill one of the raptors by driving the condor lift with the raptor on it into the teeth of the T-Rex skeleton. Then Hammond would shoot the other raptor and they would escape. However, Steven knew that if he didn't give the T-Rex one last heroic appearance, his audiences would hate him. So, one rewrite later, the ending became what it is today, with the T-Rex appearing out of nowhere, killing the two raptors while the humans escape, and roaring triumphantly as the banner falls down in front of her.
In total, the dinosaur screen time lasted for 15 minutes. 9 of them were animatronics and only 6 minutes were CGI. Filming wrapped up on November 30th, 1992, 12 days ahead of schedule. Editor Michael Kahn had a rough cut done within days, giving Spielberg enough time to go start filming his passion project, Schindler's List. Because he was on location in Poland, Steven teleconferenced ILM's crew 4 times a week to check in on their progress. He described working on both films simultaneously as a bipolar experience, where he used every ounce of intuition on Schindler's List and every ounce of craft on Jurassic Park.
Since Spielberg was in Poland, this was the first time he was unable to attend the recording session for the score of one of his own movies. Recording took place at the Sony recording studio in Culver, California. The score was written by John Williams at the end of February 1993 and conducted a month later, but because John sustained a back injury during the scoring sessions, pianist Artie Kane stepped in to conduct several cues. He was uncredited in the film, but would receive special thanks on the 1993 album's credits and would be listed as a conductor in the La La Land record set released on November 29, 2016.
Wanting this film to be the first to use digital sound, Spielberg funded the creation of DTS, dedicated to sound, a series of surround sound technologies owned by Xperi Corporation. The sound crew, headed by Star Wars' very own George Lucas, finished the sound for the film by the end of April 1993. After a good long 65 million years in the making,
or 3,
the film was finally completed by May 28, 1993. Jurassic Park premiered on June 9th at the Uptown Theater in Washington, D.C. But when it was released nationwide 2 days later, its success was as massive as the dinosaurs themselves, maybe even more so.
At the box office, they made a fortune with this film. In fact, not even Dodson could offer Nedry as much money as the movie made, both during and after its initial release. It had the biggest opening day ever with $18.2 million, biggest 3-day weekend ever with over $50 million, and biggest 7-day gross ever with over $80 million. It broke all kinds of records, like the fastest film to reach $100 million, $200 million, and $300 million, and that was only domestically, while it also earned $900 million worldwide.
As a result, Jurassic Park was the highest-grossing film of 1993 and, until Titanic was released in 1997, the highest-grossing feature of all time.
A position that had been previously held for 11 years by another Steven Spielberg movie, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. You know, both of these movies have a lot in common. They were both directed by Spielberg, composed by John Williams, and they were both the highest-grossing films of their time. So even if one outgrossed the other, I'm sure they can get along just fine. Or maybe not.
With all its riches, Jurassic Park also received plenty of praise. Critics everywhere were really fond of this movie. While they had some criticisms towards the script and departures from the book, they acclaimed its revolutionary effects, iconic music by John Williams, and Steven's direction, saying it was one of his most awe-inspiring and terrifying films since Jaws. Even Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel both gave it a thumbs up.
On top of a financial and critical hit,
The feature was a Mesozoic award magnet, winning 2 BAFTAs for Best Special Effects and Most Popular Film,
Best Foreign Film at the awards of the Japanese Academy, a Bambi Award for International Film, and a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, just to name a few. John Williams also received a Grammy nomination for Best Instrumental Composition Written for a Motion Picture or for Television, but lost that award to Alan Menken for Disney's Aladdin. At the 66th Academy Awards, Jurassic Park took home not 1, not 2, but all 3 Oscars for Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Visual Effects.
The runaway success of the movie also extended to the small screen. It was released on home video on October 4th, 1994, and it was a smash hit, with 17 million units sold on VHS and Laserdisc, making this the 7th best-selling VHS tape. It was even a phenomenon on TV when it first aired on May 7th, 1995. The ratings went through the roof, with some 68.12 million viewers, making this the highest-rated feature film broadcast since Trading Places aired on April 1987.
When Jurassic Park was re-released in 3D on April 5th, 2013 in honor of its 20th anniversary, it would earn over an extra $470 million worldwide. For its 25th anniversary in 2018, Fathom Events released the film in select theaters on April 16th, 18th, and 19th, with a 17-minute fan remake after the credits, and I was there to see it. Also in 2018, the Library of Congress selected Jurassic Park for preservation in the National Film Registry. In 2020, the feature became #1 all over again, but this time at drive-in theaters, which gained more attention as a way of watching movies while social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic.
With the combination of all the re-releases, along with an additional one in the UK in 2011 and another in 2023 for its 30th anniversary, Jurassic Park would end up making a lifetime total of over $1 billion, making it the highest-grossing film ever directed by Steven Spielberg. 2023 also saw the release of a 22-minute animated special called Lego Jurassic Park, the unofficial retelling, where Ian Malcolm retells the events of the movie in a more comedic and kid-friendly manner. The special was released exclusively on NBC Universal streaming service Peacock.
Over time, the film would become a huge chunk of pop culture, being referenced and parodied in movies like the Toy Story franchise, We're Back, a Dinosaurs Story, which was actually released a few months after Jurassic Park on November 24th, 1993, and Ted 2.
They're moving in herds. They do move in herds.
In TV shows like The Fairly Odd Parents, Family Guy, Rick and Morty, the 2020 revival of Animaniacs, and Steven Universe.
If we stand perfectly still, it won't see us. I saw it in a movie once. I think that movie was about dinosaurs.
Even Barney and his friends walk through the park gate.
Trust me, we will need that.
The movie would also find itself on many lists from critics and film organizations, including number 35 on the American Film Institute's 100 Most Thrilling Films, Bravo's 95th Scariest Movie Moment Ever for the raptors in the kitchen scene, Empire's 28th Most Magical Movie Moment Ever for the first Brachiosaurus encounter, number 1 on WatchMojo.com's top 10 movie special effects that have aged well, and it was included in the 2003 film reference book, 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, edited by Stephen J. Schneider.
It was even number 1 on another list I won't mention just yet. We'll save it for another video. What I will mention though is that Jurassic Park left an impact on everyone, from the people who worked on it to the people who saw it. It is highly regarded as one of the best films of the thriller and sci-fi genres, if not one of the best films of all time. Steven Spielberg spared no expense in getting the right actors and wizards of movie magic to adapt his buddy's book into the most advanced feature film of 1993. A film that used groundbreaking visual effects to create living biological attractions so astounding that they will continue to capture the imagination of the entire planet for generations to come.